The New England Patriots capped off a highly intense week of competition against the Philadelphia Eagles with a come-from-behind victory in the fourth quarter on Saturday night. Today, we review whose stock is rising and whose is falling after a thrilling week 2 of preseason action in Foxborough. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. Alongside Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Marotta, and on today's episode, we'll be providing our key takeaways from New England's 24-21 comeback win over Philadelphia and reviewing whose stock is up and whose is down as the cut down to 53 players quickly approaches. Tyler, what a week it was for the Patriots to wrap up training camp and home preseason action. Before we dive into the risers and fallers from the game, how are you feeling about this team after seeing them take on the Eagles 3 times over the course of the last 4 days?
Well, yeah, this was a week with a big spotlight on it, with the Eagles coming to town. And, for obvious reasons we've harped on many a times with the A.J. Brown trade, just stuff here and there that, people throw out on the internet and think that's going to happen. But honestly, the Eagles and Patriots played pretty nice together, so to speak, in joint practices and in this game. There never seemed like there was some, I think people were on high alert for if anything was going to get chippy, but no, none of that really. And I kind of always felt like that was something that was going to happen. Meaning that nothing was going to happen. But once, we get to the game, and I will say this, I do have some worries, a lot of injuries last night, so to speak, a lot of depth players, insurance policy players that, have me concerned. I'll get to that on my stock downs, but a lot of guys who really rose to the occasion as well. A lot of key guys who needed to rise to the occasion as well. That RB3 competition, I think, is going to be an incredible thing to watch. I mean, you and I have used the phrase, these are great problems to have. And I think if you look at guys like Jam Miller and Lan Larison and what's going to be going on there, who's going to get that RB3 spot, that's a great problem to have for the Patriots front office. So, I mean, I don't want to harp into that too much because we'll get to that in a few minutes, but it definitely was an interesting week for the Patriots and Eagles. But, I don't want to get too optimistic here, despite them getting a late game win, which is a fun thing to watch. That was a heck of a finish of that with that final drive by Baron Morton, led by Baron Morton. I got some fun things to say about him in just a few minutes, but I do have my concerns. I do have some worries. Mike Vrabel has some worries. I mean, this guy called a timeout in the middle, like the first or second quarter, because he thought this defense was playing like absolute. Well, we don't swear on this show, really.
Doggy doo-doo defense.
Doggy doo-doo defense is what Mike Vrabel basically very good show. But yeah, so I think Vrabel's got some concerns, and I think guys like you and me probably have some concerns, but there's still a lot of optimism, I think, going into this regular season. But there's only a few more weeks left to fix some of these problems, and I think the pressure is really on in the next coming weeks.
Yeah, it really seems like there was an equally great amount of positive takeaways as there were negative takeaways in a game like this, both going through the joint practices and the preseason game. I think it was very apparent that heading into this week, this was a measuring stick type of level of competition for the Patriots going in. You're going in against a team that just won the Super Bowl in 2024. And obviously a lot of the pieces, especially in the depth ranks on the roster, are very different at this point in time. Look at the Patriots and where they were in 2024, the same year that they just had their last set of joint practices against the Philadelphia Eagles, and how far they came and the performance that they put together during the week against Philadelphia this week, I think was a nice kind of litmus test to show you where they're at in terms of their ranking compared to the league's perennial contenders, and just how far they've come over the course of the past 2 years. I don't think any of us really had any issues with what the starters put out there on Wednesday and Thursday. Obviously, a dominant Wednesday showing for them. Things kind of leveled off a little bit on Thursday. That's to be expected when you have 2 days of joint practices. The chippiness ramps up a little bit on that second day when you're just continually going back and forth against the same groups of players. And then by the time you get to game day on Saturday, it's like they know all the plays that you're running and the concepts that you're trying to be successful with, not only for right now, but heading on into the regular season. When you have that many of the same kind of matchups against the same players, 3 of 4 days, that's just only natural to happen. So I think it created a really interesting dynamic. But once again, my concern was not about the Patriots starters at any point throughout the course of this week. I was a little bit small c concerned going into Saturday night based on the performance of the depth on the roster, the roster hopefuls, that the way that they performed during the week against the Eagles in those limited reps that they got in those joint practices, how would that carry over into the game? We saw a lot of highs and lows from them during the week. I think we saw a lot of highs and lows from them on Saturday night as well, and that's why we have probably as many stock up players as we do stock down players. Very even split there. But it was nice that they were able to endure and overcome all of those deficiencies that they had early on in the game and escape with a narrow victory late in the game. All right, Tyler, so let's jump right into it here with our stock up from the Patriots win over the Eagles. Who you got first up in stock up?
Well, I teased him a little bit, so why don't we just get into Bear Morton out the top here? I want to start, since I'm a little more of a storyline guy, as I'm sure you guys have noticed on this show. And I had to double check and make sure I wasn't about to get on here and say just like some twisted AI story that got put out there on the internet that, clearly seems to happen a lot these days. But I guess Drake Maye jokingly said something about Baron Morton is Brian Hoyer or something about a weeks. I was just like, is that real? I looked that up and I was like, he obviously jokingly said it, but I was like, ooh, that kind of stings. Look, nothing is Brian Hoyer. As you know, he was the glorified Tom Brady backup for like the last 10 years. He was playing football, primarily in New England. He also has a great podcast with David Andrews, just to plug that, by the way. But to kind of get a joke thrown that way, if I'm Baron Morton and I heard that, and look, I'm sure Morton has come to the Patriots knowing very well he's not going to be the starting quarterback of this team. He might have to kind of have sort of maybe an NFL journeyman kind of career, or who knows? I don't want to harp on that really. But if I'm Baron Morton and I heard that, for my starting quarterback say that, I'm thinking I'm going to go out and play some good football when I get the opportunity to. And I think he did. I think Morton went out there and played, obviously, I'll start kind of from the game-winning touchdown and kind of move my way back a little bit. Incredible. I think it was, It was like a 37-yard touchdown pass, 73-yard drive. He went 13 of 17, 6 of 9 on that game-winning drive. I don't know. Like it was a really cool sight to see, kind of him really putting the Superman cape on. I know it's preseason and whatnot. None of these stats really go into the books, but this might be the most action Baron Morton sees this season. So why not go make, the highlight reel, at least for the next couple weeks? I think he did just that. And, let's all kind of talk about for a second the fact that I guess he can kind of punt. And he ended up, he punted like 2 or 3 times that night, averaged 44.3 yards per that punt. Look, not bad if he needs to swoop in and become a backup punter on this team. And I think the quote was Mike Vrabel went up to him on the sidelines and said, if we got a punt on this drive, you're going in. And so immediately, I'm kind of paraphrasing off of what Morton's quote was when he was asked about it, he went right over to the kicking net and, I guess hung around Ashby and was just like, how many yards do I have to be back? And he's just like, you got to be back like 15 yards kind of thing, I guess is what he told him. He didn't really know what he was doing. And he went out there and he had a few good kicks. And, I think, I know you mentioned he didn't make your 53-man roster, and I completely understand why you didn't put him. I think that was the big shocker on one of last week's episodes. That, you think he's going to be on the practice squad. And I very well can see that. But I think he also made a case for himself to say like, no, let me be a QB3 here. tonight. And he also showed with being able to punt, not that the Patriots really need a backup punter, but you never know what the heck is going to happen. He can be that guy. He can bring versatility, which is someone, a trait that Mike Vrabel very much looks for. And look, I just loved what I saw out of him as being the second half quarterback in this game. Tommy DeVito played a great game as well. DeVito kind of held things and kind of was what he needed to be both last week and this week. But Morton, for obvious reasons, was one of the standout storylines of this game. So stock up for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you frame that with him putting on the Superman cape, because that is not at all what he was asked to do in last week's game against the Indianapolis Colts. 7 of 13 last week with 66 yards passing. This week, he was much more of we're going to give you the keys to the car and you're driving it. He was not the game manager. He was in charge, and he made the most of that opportunity for himself. I don't think that was anything that the Patriots were necessarily expecting to have him do going into the game. I think that you want to be a little bit more conservative, like they showed last week against Indianapolis when they were kind of playing and maintaining a lead. But that wasn't the game situation that he ultimately ended up being in on Saturday night against Philadelphia. And once again, he went out there and he did everything he possibly could to make a case to be on this 53-man roster by the time we're sitting here wrapping up cutdown day in just about a week from now. Made me shut up really quick about that 53-man roster projection we had this past week where I didn't have him on the roster. Not only is he going out there as the quarterback that's going out and winning into the game last night, he's going out and punting on special teams with those 3 punts. So you mentioned it, the versatility. Absolutely love to see that. The efficiency. I thought he ran the offense with a lot more efficiency than we even saw with Tommy DeVito in the first half of that game. And he was doing so behind largely the same offensive line that Tommy DeVito was out there running the offense with. And what we saw in the first half from DeVito was obviously he had a lot of pressures. He had a few quarterback hits that he was dealing with. And I think you saw him start to get rattled a little bit in the pocket, start to make more plays with his legs, first read and kind of pull your eyes down and start to take off with the football. Baron Morton sat back in the pocket. He progressed through his reads. He made the right decision more times than not. He finished, like you said, 13 of 17, 129 yards passing, the game-winning touchdown pass. And Tyler, 2 separate 10-plus play drives that were touchdown scoring drives capped off in the fourth quarter to give the Patriots the lead. The first one was at the tail end of the third quarter when the Patriots took over possession. They end up scoring that touchdown. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, that was a 12-play, 59-yard drive that Lan Larison ends up getting into the end zone on. And then his next possession that ended up being the game-winning touchdown for the Patriots was 11 plays, 73 yards. As you mentioned, he goes 6 of 9 on that drive, and just start to finish from the time he went in the game to the time that game was wrapping up. Baron Morton, just an extremely impressive performance from him last night, and love to see that. I'll give you one other guy just so we're not talking about all the same players here, because we did share our lists with each other before the show, and I love a lot of the guys that you have on both your stock up and stock down lists. I think I could piggyback off of you on a few of these, but just to give you another one here before I toss it back, how about Kindle Vildor last night? If we're going to go on these guys that I was a little bit lower on, that really impressed. Kindle Vildor in that battle for the fourth cornerback role has had quite the week and a half plus here with the Patriots. He had an interception on the opening drive for the Indianapolis Colts last week in the preseason opener. He has another interception in joint practices to wrap things up on Thursday this week for the Patriots. And then he goes out in the game on Saturday night, almost has another interception. 3 pass breakups in this game, if you're including the one that was the almost pick on the Gabe Akis roughing the passer call. And in the first quarter of the game, to get things started, had a key 3rd and 7 stop where he tackled the receiver short of the sticks, short of the line to gain to force a punt. He was the highest graded player in coverage for the Patriots last night with a PFF grade of 96.3. A lot of question marks behind that elite trio of corners that the Patriots have at the top of the room with Christian Gonzalez, Carlton Davis, and Marcus Jones. Really feels like it could be anybody's job to take in that 4th or 5th corner type of spot there for the Patriots. Good contributions yet again from Karan Prunty, but since Charles Woods has kind of worked his way back from an injury that kept him off the field for a few days throughout training camp, it's really been Kindle Vildor that has taken the momentum and continued to move forward through the preseason here. So I think that he's one that I'm starting to reconsider myself as far as could he be on this team come week one. He's played a little bit inside, played a little bit outside, and he's shown up everywhere the Patriots have put him on the field. So really liked what I saw from Kindle Vildor. Who else you got here, Tyler?
I'll get to, I just want a quick Vildor thing. I just think he's really separated himself from the pack. And I think the interception last week against the Colts really showed the strength he has within that group that he's fighting for that roster spot with. But Saturday night really showed him kind of separating himself from those other guys that are kind of fighting for that roster spot behind your Christian Gonzalez's and whatnot. I love what I'm seeing out of Prunty too, but I got some question marks around him as well. But Vildor for me just has been this guy was one penalty away from having 2 interceptions in the preseason. That was just a cool sight to see. Yeah, I think he's been my favorite story, maybe not my favorite, top 3 story out of the preseason in terms of guys that came slightly out of nowhere for me in the depth chart. One last Morton thing, clutch 4th and 1 pass to Kyle Dixon to keep the drive alive. That was an impressive thing as well. But as we're moving along here, let me go to another big one for me, and it's a favorite of the show, Mr. Land Larison. And look, I don't want to necessarily eat my words, but I guess I'll eat my words a little bit. I put Jam Miller on my 53-man roster spot. I'm not saying I'm taking Jam Miller off right now, but I'm just saying, like I said at the top of the show, these are great problems to have, and it's unfortunate to see who gets the poop end of the stick. Well, we really are a PG show here. Poop end of the stick here in terms of who's going to get that 3rd running back spot, because I'm not going to take anything away from Jam Miller last week against the Colts. He had to put the Superman cape on, and he did pretty well, but Land Larison, I think you're kind of starting to see the dynamic of the friendly competition between these now teammates, between who's going to get that roster spot. Jam Miller has a great game last week. Land Larison goes, okay, I need to respond. 28-yard reception pass. He had a 4th and 1 where he was hit in the backfield, but he kept it chugging and got the first down. That was 9. That was impressive. 9 carries for 33 yards. He had 2 kick returns for 54 yards. If you're, getting nothing but high praise from Mike Vrabel on the grit and, just ruggedness he brings to the football field. I think just makes for a solid rebuttal to Jam Miller's performance last week. Land Larison has just been a favorite of this show, and to kind of see him still in the mix and still very much, I say he edges it out a little bit. We might be going back and forth through the weeks, through the next week and a half, I'd say. But Land Larison, I think, now has the one up again for the running back, the RB3 spot. A lot of the other running backs that were in the mix, I know you might have a few to touch on a little bit on your stock down. I don't know if I just walked away for a couple minutes, but I didn't even know there was – I won't name names, but there were some other guys that were brought in that I didn't even know were in the game because they just didn't have a statement like Larison had in this one. So big stock up for this guy. He feels like a Patriot through and through. I hope he's around for the long haul. I, again, don't want to eat my words with Jam Miller. Loved what I saw to Jam Miller last week, but this was Larison's game, and I loved what I saw.
Yeah, Land Larison, you mentioned it, a show favorite and a guy that I had on my most recent 53-man roster projection, even after the struggles that he had against the Indianapolis Colts. I think just too much stock that I put in his experience in this Josh McDaniels offense. Obviously, only just about a year and change, but we've talked about at length how Josh McDaniels, especially with the running back position, prefers his guys to have almost a red shirt year to start things off so they can understand the responsibilities that they have as a pass protector in the passing game, as a receiver out of the backfield, and as a runner between the tackles. That didn't really show up for Larison last week. A much better performance from him as a runner in this game. And you kind of touched on it there, Tyler, on that first fourth quarter touchdown drive. A 4th and 1 conversion for Larison. He also converted on a 3rd and 9 with his legs, and that was the play that preceded his touchdown run where the Patriots, like they have been doing and working on all through training camp, run no huddle up to the line of scrimmage, catch the defense napping a little bit, snap the ball very quickly and get it to Larison, where he's able to plow it into the end zone to give the Patriots their first lead of the fourth quarter when they initially went up 17-14. This guy does everything for you that you could possibly want as a receiving threat out of the backfield. He's a reliable between the tackles runner, even though he doesn't give you the kind of explosiveness like a player like Jam Miller may as a between the tackles runner. He gives you value on special teams as a kick returner. This guy is just going to find a way to impact the game and carve out a role on the roster. I don't think that it's a little bit where he's kind of edging out Jam Miller at this point. I really think it's a lot of it. And I think that Jam Miller is a great addition to the practice squad for now. And you kind of take the long view for a player like that, where he can develop a little bit over the course of the season if anything happens in front of him, very similar to the way that they managed Terrell Jennings last year. Then you could call him up in certain spots and kind of keep him on the roster without needing him on the 53. But I think as far as guys that you're expecting to be reliable contributors from day one moving forward, I think Lane Larison has really cemented himself as the guy to beat in that running back room. For me, I think we're going to talk a lot, especially when we get to stock down here, about the play in the trenches, both on the offensive and defensive line. I want to kick things off in the trenches with a more positive note, though. A player that was on my stock up from last night was Demetrius Crownover, and he comes into the game just 5 snaps in when Marcus Bryant goes down with an injury, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But Crownover steps in and led all Patriots tackles with 68 blocking snaps taken last night. He did allow a sack in the third quarter, but outside of that, he was absolutely lights out. He got much less help on that line, on that side of the line of scrimmage than Caleb Lomu did on the left side. I was watching him very closely. Had a lot of running back help, tight end help as chippers to give him a better angle, especially as a pass blocker. Crownover was left on an island a little bit more than Lomu was, and he held up extraordinarily well outside of that one really bad rep where he allowed an uncontested sack to Joshua Weru on the Philadelphia Eagles at the beginning of the third quarter. Crownover finishes the game playing the vast majority of his snaps at right tackle. At the tail end of the game, he also did take 12 snaps at left tackle, and he graded out as the Patriots' highest graded pass blocker on the night with a PFF grade of 80.1. This is a guy that I've been really high on all summer long. He was a fringe top 100 type prospect going into the NFL draft. The Patriots stole him at 196 overall, and I've been trying to find a way to have Demetrius Crownover included on my 53-man roster. This most recent addition was the only one that I haven't had him on. And of course, Marcus Bryant was the player that I had in replacement of him. Bryant goes down with an injury in this game, could open the door back up for Crownover, and that could be great for his development within the system. I fear that this is a player that if you let him go through waivers and try and play the game with him, re-signing him back to the practice squad, another team is going to come in and scoop him up and sign him before he can clear waivers. So that might be a pathway for him now to make the roster. And even if he's not going to be a day one contributor for you, this is another in the line of these really athletic big men that the Patriots are bringing in to fill in along the offensive line. And I would like to see him with an extended runway to kind of develop in this Patriots system, and maybe year 2, year 3, see what he can provide as a little bit more of a full-time player at that point. But really loved what I saw from Crownover last night. All right, Tyler, I think we got one more on stock up here before we go to stock down. Who you got?
Pretty much it's a guy who I haven't really talked about that much. John Saunders Jr. here for the Patriots. Look, 8 combined tackles last night. He led the team with tackles, by the way, after the game, 4 of which were solo. I mean, he's just kind of adding to his preseason success. Mike Vrabel's pretty much quoted about him as just like having a strong ascension throughout training camp and whatnot. He was pretty much a threat down the middle. Nothing flashy last night. Broke up a pass against tight end Eli Stowers for the Eagles.
Stowers, yep.
Stowers. Sorry. Sorry about that. Eagles quarterback Cole Payton got picked off by him in joint practices. He's had a summer turnover resume of that kind of stuff that we've seen over the last few weeks and whatnot. I just kind of think he was really good last night at getting the defense off the field when they needed to do that. Again, versatility and having a ton of range is a guy that Vrabel wants on his defense. And I think you kind of saw that with him being all over the field last night. But again, the middle of the field, I think, was kind of his bread and butter, with just not letting a receiver really have that much of an impact and getting first downs and whatnot. So that, again, just key. He got the Patriots defense off the field, got the ball back into Baron Morton or DeVito's hands, whoever was on the field at the time. Again, I just think he's had a great last 3 or 4 weeks. He's gotten better every week in that safety room. Again, nothing too flashy, but just stock up for me. Loved what I saw.
Yeah, love that. And I've loved what we've seen out of John Saunders over the course of the past few weeks here. He's really a guy that it looked like it was going to be Mike Brown as that third safety early on in the spring. Del Pettis has been in the room for quite some time now. He looked to be taking some steps forward in the latter portion of the regular season last year. And John Saunders, even though he was on the roster at the tail end of last year, was a guy that was really overlooked, I feel, in that safety room. And he has done everything in his power to make sure that that is not the case as we move forward into cut down week here for the Patriots. He leads all Patriots defenders through training camp practices and preseason games with 5 interceptions, always seems to be around the football, not just opportunistic when there's a ridiculously bad throw by a backup quarterback somewhere and he's in position to make the play. He is hunting out the football and making sure that he is active wherever the play is going. You saw that yet again last night, and I think that he's making a real case for inclusion on the 53-man roster and as that third rotational safety for the Patriots. There's been a lot of talk of Del Pettis kind of being that box safety with Craig Woodson and Kevin Byard over the top if they want to play more 3 safety sets, which we've certainly seen an increased volume of through these training camp practices. I think that I would almost start to lean in a different direction. Craig Woodson, we know, was the highest graded run defending safety in the league last year with a run defense grade of 89.7. Why not play him in the box a little bit more and have your 2 over-the-top safeties as John Saunders and Kevin Byard? Just give them a little bit more freedom to roam over the top in the third level of that defense, but certainly gives you, if you're the Patriots, a little bit more multiplicity where you can have guys like Pettis and Saunders waiting in the wings. Makes you feel a lot better about the depth that they have in that room than they did entering the year last year with the turnover that they had in that room as they were getting rid of guys like Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers from that room. They were starting to move away from more of those box safeties. I think Saunders really fits the bill for what they're looking for as a third safety on this team. So really love that by you. I think that we would be remiss if we went this entire section without talking about Nick DeGennaro. Obviously not a guy that we, either of us, expect to be on the 53-man roster come cut down day later this week, but a great performance by the undrafted free agent with 4 receptions, 61 yards in the game, and of course that 37-yard game-winning touchdown pass. It just wasn't just that deep ball down the sidelines, though, that DeGennaro made an impact on the game with. He had a nice little juke route from the slot, very Julian Edelman-esque a little bit earlier on in the quarter. Would have liked to see him kind of bring the ball in with his hands instead of his body a little bit more on that one. It kind of popped up into the air and he had to catch it twice, but a couple of really nice plays from DeGennaro last night, obviously with the capper being the game-winning touchdown with under a minute remaining in this game. Again, not a player that either of us expect to be on the 53-man roster, but certainly a practice squad candidate and nice filler depth for the Patriots once you get past that top group of wide receivers that we all anticipate to be on the roster come September 9th in Seattle. So now we transition to stock down. And Tyler, once again, I think that there are equally as many players that we could have probably put in this bucket as what we talked about with stock up. Who do you have first up on your stock down list?
Well, first one I kind of want to be a little sensitive about because I think injuries do play into it with Chad Muma. Look, the he's had the biggest, sorry for stuttering. He's been the biggest fall from grace for me, because in training camp, Muma was coming into this really as what felt like Spillane and Ellis's kind of rotating linebacker for the most part for me. Look, I don't want to say he necessarily had a sloppy game last night. There just was kind of an uneventful, as I kind of put it. Missed a handful of tackles, very slow off the ball, in my opinion, honestly. And look, we're looking at 2 bad preseason games right now. And this kind of puts his roster bubble situation, I feel, in question. But again, some injuries have played him over for a while now. I think it's just kind of affected him throughout the offseason and whatnot. And he went down very late in the game last night. And I think now we're entering this territory where, again, I'll use the word uneventful. We haven't seen much out of him throughout training camp and both games. And now you play injuries into it. And I think that's just it brings his stock down. I'll just start by saying it like that. But that's also going to put a lot of things in question for him come time for cutdown day. And you'd hate to say it because you're looking at that linebacker room and you're wondering who's going to be the guy. And I think of Mike Vrabel in this situation and, him being a linebacker at one, as in his playing career, and kind of not seeing maybe the depth he wants out of his backup guys and his insurance policy guys behind Spillane and Ellis. And the fact that there's a promisingness about Muma going into this off season, that this has got to be a frustrating situation for Vrabel. And I think in a situation like this, that's where maybe he falls victim to cutdown. And I don't want to, again, I'm trying to be sensitive here because I know injuries do play into it, but sometimes injuries are what make them make that decision. Shame to say it, but I have to put stock down on him.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately for Chad Muma, this was a player that we were both high on as being that kind of Jack Gibbons replacement as that first rotational off-ball linebacker for the Patriots, and a guy that saw a lot of time through the spring and early summer wearing the green dot whenever Robert Spillane wasn't on the field as the defensive signal caller for the Patriots. But just a couple of bad preseason games in a row now for him. Missed tackles, some lapses in coverage where he wasn't necessarily where he was supposed to be when he was supposed to be there. And to add insult to injury there, I guess, the injury at the end of the game definitely puts things kind of in jeopardy for him moving forward. We've seen KJ Britt start to see an increased role on defense. He actually saw Khalil Jacobs, your guy, get a start for the first time last night. So it was great to see him out there early, but this is certainly a position that the Patriots, I think, even felt that they were a little bit thin at going into the offseason here. They tried to do a couple of things to rectify that as a position of need. I still don't think that they're very comfortable with where they're at. I think that was a lot of the rationale or justification behind a visit that you saw last week with Shaq Thompson coming in, veteran linebacker, and actually former Boston Red Sox draft pick Shaq Thompson. So we'll see if a signing materializes there, especially now given the injury status of Muma. We'll have to monitor that moving forward, but this is a position where it still feels like the Patriots could use some additional depth, and they've kind of been poking around very much like they did with Greg Van Roten when they had him in on a visit about a week prior to signing him. They gave these guys one preseason game to go out there and show what they could do on the field. A couple injuries factor into the equation there, but they end up bringing in Van Roten a little bit later on. I think that we could see a very similar situation in the Patriots linebacking core there with them trying to add here. For me, on stock down, I'm taking a couple of swings really early on here, Tyler. I'm not pulling any punches here.
I know you are.
Caleb Lomu is first up for me, and this is a player that I still really, really like. I think that he could be a valuable asset for the Patriots. But I think that we've started to see his role shrink and shrink and shrink as training camp has gone along here. At the beginning of this process, it felt like he could be your backup swing tackle there for both left tackle and right tackle, and start to move into guard a little bit with the interior offensive line depth, not necessarily being exactly where you wanted. It felt like Lomu could have been a substitute at about 4 different positions along the offensive line. And as time has gone on here, didn't have a great performance against the Colts. Didn't have a great performance during the week against the Eagles. He had a pressure that was allowed on Drake Maye's red zone interception to Tariq Woolen in the middle of the week. And once again, that shrinking role actually ended up siloing him back all the way at left tackle for the Patriots for almost the entire game last night. And this is not at all an indictment on Will Campbell. And I'm sure there's going to be a segment of people out there like, oh, Lomu's playing left tackle. What does that mean for Will Campbell? This is more getting Lomu back to where he's comfortable. He was a left tackle in college. Will Campbell's had a fantastic offseason. He's really reaffirmed a lot of people's beliefs that he can be the long-term left tackle for this team moving forward, but it's more about the struggles that Lomu has had through the early preseason action that we've gotten here, where he just wasn't great at right tackle, so you end up moving him back to left tackle. And guys, he wasn't great at left tackle last night either. He, like Crownover, gave up a sack in this game, but I think it was a much uglier sack. It was a misidentified TE stunt by the defense, a defensive tackle looping around the outside, becoming an exterior and edge rusher, Ty Robinson, for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Lomu crashes down inside trying to take the edge rusher. Robinson wraps around the outside. He just doesn't see him until it's way too late. He gets turned around. And anytime you have your left tackle with his eyes in the backfield looking back at the quarterback, there's a problem there. And Lomu just not very consistent in his one-on-one reps. Where he had a little bit more success, as I mentioned earlier, was when they had running backs and tight ends flanking him off of the line of scrimmage, giving him some chip help. We saw that a lot with Campbell last year. So just an extra little body to help him get a better angle on a lot of those blocks. But I would go into this game, if I'm the Patriots, hoping that that wouldn't be as necessary if you're playing him at a position that he's already accustomed to playing, with that being his collegiate position that he played at Utah for the last 3 years. So Lomu, although, it looked like he was going to be the swing tackle option for this team, he may still end up having to be the swing tackle option for this team because of the injuries in the room around him. But I think that they are really far away from that being plan A at this point in the summer. And we see that role continuing to shrink. I think he's closer to being more of a guy that they want to have a true redshirt year for than a guy that you're going to see significant contributions from on the field this fall. Really unfortunate for Lomu, but hopefully that is to his benefit with his long-term development. Just focus on him being that long-term replacement for Morgan Moses on the right side of the line of scrimmage, but make sure that you can kind of boost his confidence. You would have thought that would have been last night at left tackle, but apparently not. Maybe that'll be this upcoming week against the Browns. All right, Tyler, who you got next up?
Well, I had Saunders on stock up in terms of the safeties, and I'm going to go with Mike Brown for stock down, unfortunately. But whatever. Missed tackles, a late hit that penalized the team, and what Saunders kind of did in the middle of the field last night, Mike Brown kind of couldn't do. Really just couldn't slow anything down, and kind of kept the Eagles in the game as their passing's going straight down the middle and whatnot. And look, this, I think it was one of Vrabel, of course, mentioned at the top of the show. I'm talking about Mike Vrabel a lot tonight, but Mike Vrabel at the top, I mentioned Vrabel through called a timeout. And I think Mike Brown's kind of mishaps were the reason why Vrabel called that timeout. Defensive doo-doo, as you and I like to call it. That was kind of around the time he was on the field. And I do want to talk about him being on the field. Mike Brown was on the field for a very long time last night. And I feel that with that situation in the second preseason game, if you're playing into the fourth quarter, that says to me, not that they really want to see how good you are. Or, well, I mean, they want to see the improvements. They want to see the steps forward. But if you're playing that far into the game, I think that's where your question on the roster bubble really starts to come into play. I mean, there's a few guys out there that played very long games last night that I'm not even sure if they're going to make our next 53-man roster. Look, just a lot of alarming mishaps in comparison to what I talked about with Saunders, almost like a complete 180 from that. Again, the middle of the field, there was a lot of great protection from Saunders, a lot of great stops. Polar opposite from Mike Brown, a lot of gainage, a lot of yards from the Eagles offense. I just didn't really like what I saw. So I don't know. I don't know. I think Saunders is really at the forefront of forefront of insurance policy in that safety room. But Mike Brown, to me, just undisciplined football last night, if that's what I want to call it.
Yeah, it really seems like Saunders and Brown are going in completely opposite directions, and that could certainly have an impact on the 53-man roster. I definitely second everything that you said about Mike Brown there. Some defensive coverage lapses last night from him that kept him playing into the game, and totally agree. If you're a guy like Brown and you're playing into the fourth quarter of a preseason game, it's probably because the team hasn't seen what they've wanted to see out of you through the first three quarters. And you need those extra reps to kind of try and show something a little bit more than you had through the first 45 minutes of action. For me, again, I'm going to take another big swing here. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this one, but I'm going to do it anyways. Kyle Williams under stock down for me. And let me preface this by saying that I am and continue to be in the Kyle Williams fan club. I think that the blazing speed that he has is an elite attribute that you don't get with a lot of the receivers, especially in the lower ranks of any roster. He has a very defined trait that is very difficult for a lot of teams to be able to match up with. And that is a fantastic thing. We certainly saw that last night on his extremely explosive 69-yard touchdown reception. Now touchdown receptions in both of the preseason contests, but look, maybe this is just a thing for me at this point where I'm expecting more than just that from Kyle Williams. We knew going into last night that he could beat a guy down the sideline with his 4.344 speed, get off of the ball at the release and score a touchdown on a go ball. Like, that has been proven time and time again with his connections with Drake Maye late in the season last year and throughout camp both of the last 2 years, that is a specialty of Kyle Williams' game. But you don't draft him in the third round to just get a go ball out of a really fast receiver. It is all of the other things that make up his game that we have still been waiting to see develop that just haven't been there. If you remove that one play from Kyle Williams last night, that 69-yard touchdown catch, he was one catch on 5 targets for 5 receiving yards. That is not going to get it done anywhere. And this was in a game without Kayshon Boutte on the field, without Matt Collins on the field, without Demario Douglas on the field and Romeo Doubs on the field and A.J. Brown on the field, against the Eagles' second and third string players, where he really should have been the best receiver on the field. And you don't have the excuse of this week, oh, well, he's playing with Drake Maye and he hasn't really gotten a lot of reps with the starters. He was playing with Tommy DeVito, a guy that he has seen the vast majority of his reps come with through this summer. There should be a connection there. There should be chemistry there. And this should have really been an opportunity for Kyle Williams to go out and have that extremely efficient performance where he's doing more than just catching a go ball down the sideline. So I really want to see a lot more from Kyle Williams. I think that he has all of the tools in his tool bag to be able to start converting on some of those other plays. I think he's got one of the best release packages on the team, getting off the line of scrimmage. You saw that on the touchdown. I think you could start to see that impact some other areas of his game, but it just hasn't clicked yet. And that's why I have him in stock down for this game. Tyler, I know that's a big one. Any pushback on that, or are we kind of feeling the same way on that one?
I wish I had pushback for you. I feel like I haven't had a lot of pushback for you lately on stuff. But I wish I had pushback on you, but I completely agree because look at it. 2 catches for 74 yards is, I think, what I'm reading. And it's because of that 69-yard touchdown is why he's got 74, 69 of it is the touchdown. Look, you and I have talked about in the past on this show, Kyle Williams we're hoping for a year 2 stretch forward. And I think he's poised for it. But to harp on a word that I've said a lot today and a lot throughout the show is versatility. And I don't think he's showing it. I don't think he showed it last night. Really, down the stretch, fine. Maybe he can really wow us, but I don't want to be too much into critical name calling here, but I was reading a lot of different articles before I hopped on here and whatnot, because I wanted to leave Kyle Williams for you. I didn't mean to dump him on you, but I kind of wanted to put him on my stock down, but I decided to put somebody else a little more obvious on there. But because I wasn't sure, because it was such a nice catch. It was such a nice touchdown pass, but that's really it. And someone said in a different article, not on Roundtable, I won't name what it is, he's got alligator arms across the middle. And I'd hate to use kind of words, but really kind of outside of what he can do down the sidelines, it's almost like he's struggling to catch the ball down the middle. And I think if we want Kyle Williams to really fit into this offense a little more often, we need to put him in different schemes and whatnot, because AJ Brown's going to be a little more of that guy for Drake Maye. Kyle Williams needs to find a different identity for Drake Maye in year 2. And I think that would be a big help for him to take a big step forward, like you and I.
So, yeah, it's the timing, it's the chemistry, and I really like what you talked about with the alligator arms there. I think for me, when I'm looking at it, he's a body catcher. I think that you have 2 types of receivers. You got the guys that go out and extend for the football and bring it in, guys like A.J. Brown, Matt Collins, Kayshon Boutte, the guys that are really versatile down the field receivers that you can throw those 50-50 balls up to. They go out and they attack the football. Kyle Williams is a little bit more of one of these guys that tries to guide it in, uses chest, uses arms a little bit to catch the football. I think that leads to drops for a lot of receivers until they can get over that mental hurdle. But it's that, and it's the timing. It's the maybe he cuts off a hitch a little bit too short and it throws off the timing with the quarterback's drop back in the pocket, or he's just not able to drag his feet on the sideline when he's extending out for a catch on a deep crosser in the halfway through the first quarter. It's just the little details with his game that just haven't quite gotten there that you would like to see at this point, especially if you're going to feel comfortable trading a receiver like Kayshon Boutte that you know does all of those things, has proven that for you on the field already, and you want to trade a guy like that to give Kyle Williams more opportunities. You'd like to see some signs of development from him in those areas that I just don't think we've quite gotten just yet.
Fair, definitely.
All right, Tyler, who you got? Last one up on Stock Down before we move to our honorable mentions and start to wrap things up here.
Last one I'm going to throw on here is the second straight week he's been on my Stock Down list. I got to go with James Hudson on the offensive line. Look, Hudson comes on this team with a lot of baggage. I talked about this the last time we did Stock Up, Stop Down. I feel like I'm just going to rehash what I said because it's a lot of the same things. He comes off of having a complete meltdown in the New York Giants last year in that infamous, I think it was like 4 penalties on one drive, and he goes on the sidelines and throws a fit. I played nice last week with him, giving him the benefit of the doubt and whatnot, but this is the second week of just undisciplined football. It's the preseason. This is where coaches are really getting in your face. You got to do this right if you're going to be a part of this team. And 2 holding calls that killed drives early on this game. I think it was the same drive. I think it was one drive.
First drive of the game. Yeah.
First drive of the game. I don't think he's done any. I just don't think he's done anything of any relevant. I don't think he's done anything great, really, when he's been on the field. I'm waiting for something to pop off with him that's going to just send this thing off the rails, and I don't want that for any professional football player. You know, these guys are fighting for a job right now, but there just seems to be a pattern here. Second week in a row that he's making Tommy DeVito scramble and run all over the place. And I don't think Tommy DeVito's playing that bad of football out there. I just think it's guys like Hudson right now that are making it a little extra harder for him. It's just undisciplined all over. That's all it really is. He's second time on my list. He right now has got to be in the pool of names already starting to develop for cutdown day. You can't have a guy like this, even if it's at depth, because if anybody goes down and your starter goes down and you have to resort to this guy, it's not keeping your offensive line stable in times of instability. So big time Stock Down, second week in a row for James Hudson for me.
Totally agree on that one as well. Hudson, you would like to see a little bit more from him. He's a veteran player in this league and one of these guys that you felt like had position flexibility where he could provide you some depth at guard in addition to the work that he does at tackle. He's pretty much moved exclusively into guard over the course of the past week and change. He did see reps at right guard and left tackle against the Colts, pretty much stuck to that right guard position nearly the entire game on Saturday night against the Eagles. And you mentioned the 2 holding calls. Also just a blatant blunder in the second quarter on a blitzing Jeremiah Trotter Jr., where Trotter was basically lined up head on James Hudson before the ball was snapped, and he sets to the right, completely whiffs on this guy, doesn't even give him a second look, And before Tommy DeVito was even able to get to the base of his drop back, he's getting dropped in the backfield for a sack by Jeremiah Trotter Jr. That is absolutely inexcusable. You can't trust a guy like that to be on the field, especially when Drake Maye's under center and not Tommy DeVito in regular season action. So a player that, because of the lack of depth that you have along the interior, you would have really liked to see take some more steps forward here this week. That just hasn't been the case. And I agree, this is a guy that has to be on the cutting board here as we move closer and closer to cut down day. Last up for me here is in the running back room. We talked about Lan Larison. I think that you could put Jam Miller kind of in that same kind of vein there where they're battling it out for the RB3 role. I also really liked what we've seen from Hassan Haskins, a former fourth-round pick by Mike Vrabel, has started to get some increased run with that second-team offense since he was picked up right before the Indianapolis game. The guy that came back that I thought was a real dark horse to make this team because he has previous experience playing for the Patriots was JaMycal Hasty, and we just have not seen anything from this player that would give you any indication that he has staying power in that running back room. Just 5 carries for 12 yards last night. And he almost had the fumble that gave the game away in the fourth quarter after the Patriots had a 17-14 lead. They get the ball back on what could have been really a put-away drive for the offense, and he fumbles the ball, forced fumble by former Patriot Shaun Wade along the sideline that was recovered by Philadelphia. Ultimately ends up to them taking the lead on that ensuing drive with a touchdown by Carson Steele, where he's hurtling over Eric Butler into the end zone and taking a 21-17 lead. That could have been it for the Patriots had Baron Morton not just had ice in his veins and walked all the way down the field for a late game touchdown drive. That could have been an extremely costly turnover for the Patriots. And if you're trying to earn a roster spot behind a couple of set in stone starters, you're not going to be turning the football over in game situations. We haven't seen Hasty get a lot of reps so far. When you have a takeaway or a turnover on a play that you actually do get a chance to be on the field, that does not bode well for your future with this team as cut down day gets closer and closer here. So not a great showing from JaMycal Hasty, and I think that he is firmly in last place in that running back battle. All right, so we are going to move ahead here to a couple of honorable mentions. Guys that just barely missed the list, and I'll kind of start things out here, Tyler, and just a more overarching one. I think health and depth are two things that are on the down for the Patriots as we walk into the last week of the preseason. Before the game even started, you saw Travion Henderson, Eli Raritan, and Kevin Byard all not suited up for this game. Less concerned about what we've seen from Henderson and Byard and their roles on this team. I think they're very safe. Normally these guys do suit up and at least go through warmups. A little bit more surprised on Eli Raritan not being there in action pregame. Maybe a sign of confidence that, he's received all this extra run with the first team offense, that he didn't necessarily have to be out there on the field for this game. But that's something that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on moving forward. He looked to be that tight end too in the room, and we'll have to see what happens on that front if there is something lingering that we are currently unaware of. But yet again, for this offensive line, a really difficult day in the trenches for the Patriots early on, offensively and defensively, and that was just exacerbated by Marcus Bryant going down 5 snaps into the game with an injury. As Caleb Lomu's stock has started to go down through the preseason, Marcus Bryant has continued to rise. He was a 7th-round pick last year and was kind of that spot starter for the Patriots in certain spots last year before they brought in Thayer Munford. It looked like he had a really good camp this summer and had a really great performance against Indianapolis in the preseason opener. Really difficult for him to go down with that injury. We're going to definitely have to see how extensive that is because he really could have been that third tackle option, that swing tackle that the Patriots were looking to use as a stopgap while Lomu kind of gets up to speed with the offense. So not great to see him go down there. Also, Bryce Behringer in this game. We talked Baron Morton up for his ability to punt the football. It's never great when you have your third quarterback out there punting the football, though. Bryce Behringer was supposed to be the one guy on this team really going into camp. We were thinking, okay, he's definitely going to get some competition. By the time we sat here right now, he has the most job security in that room. We've seen other long snappers come in. We've seen Andy Borregales' job security become in question after his performance last week. And it was really Bryce Behringer holding down the fort for the specialists there for him to walk off after 2 punts with some sort of undisclosed injury. Maybe he just wasn't feeling great. That was out of an abundance of caution that they kept him off the field. Just not great for the Patriots to have question marks all of a sudden with that punter spot after already having some other questions at long snapper and at kicker. So just really all across the board, but especially in the trenches, not a great showing for the Patriots, and certainly rationale behind why they brought in some extra visits along the interior of the defensive line with Daquan Jones, at linebacker with Shaq Thompson. Just the depth is not really where you want it to be, and Mike Vrabel said as much in their post-game press conference yesterday. Tyler, who you got here under honorable mentions?
Honorable mention, kind of an obvious one, Andy Borregales, who needed to have a comeback week, and he did just that. You know, after the missed field goal against the Colts that would have won them 2 for 5 last week in the preseason matchup, Mike Vrabel getting up there and basically, you know, telling his kicker to the press, basically, come on, got to do better. But he went out there against the Eagles, 3 for 3 on extra points and a 41-yard field goal, his only field goal of the game in the second quarter. So I don't want to say it was necessarily he wowed and us completely with what he needed to do, but that's the thing. He did what he needed to do as a kicker in the NFL. 32 teams, all of them pretty much just have one kicker. So therefore, if you have a slip up, it is very easy for a head coach to go, well, I'm going to start to look elsewhere. No confirmation if Mike Vrabel actually made a few phone calls, or Elliott Wolf for that matter did that. But Borregales went out there and did what he needed to do. Knows what he, to be an NFL kicker in this league, you got to be very accurate. You have to be on the ball. You cannot miss out of the gate. And we've seen him have a rusty start before in the past, but this, I think, shows his resilience, shows that he took his notes and takes his job very seriously, and had himself a normal game on Saturday night, I guess is how we'll put it. So, yeah.
Yeah, great to see Andy bounce back after a rough start last week. And you mentioned it, Tyler. He did have a rough start to the 2025 season. And after a challenge and really a show of confidence from Mike Vrabel after that Miami game that was really bad for him in the early portion of last season, he bounced back big time from that, was really reliable for the Patriots down the stretch of the season. That's your expectation going into the year. Obviously, just 4 kicks for him on the night, 3 extra points, the 1 field goal. He also looked really good during the week, though. They, as penance for him, kind of had him working on those skinny goalposts throughout the course of the week, and he went 8 of 11 on those kicks, and 2 of those misses definitely would have been makes had it been on the regulation-sized, wider goalposts. So a really good week for Andy Borregales after a tough showing against Indianapolis. I got one more here for you on my honorable mentions, and it's kind of a 2-parter. We've talked a lot about the trenches in our stock down list. I'm going to give you a sign of life for the trenches in Gabe Akis and Amari Gaynor. 2 obviously very different projections for these players moving forward. Akis, some highs and lows in the game, but I thought in totality, he was much more present on the field on a per snap basis for the Patriots last night. Obviously needs to work on setting the edge as a run defender. He had a couple of not great reps going up against the ginormous Markel Bell, the rookie offensive tackle out of the University of Miami. If you remember going back through our mock drafts, we talked a little Markel Bell. He's like 6'9", just absolutely ginormous human being, and was really able to, in a reversal of fates for Gabe Akis, he's normally the one doing the physically imposing on his opponents. Markel Bell really was able to wrangle him in, so much so that Gabe Akis had to switch sides at a certain point in the second quarter of that game and start rushing off of the left side of the offense's line of scrimmage there. But really good performance from him, getting into the backfield more consistently. Did not get home for a sack, but had a couple of pressures, a couple of quarterback hits. And I think it's just about finding that snap in, snap out consistency for him. That seems to be the thing that Mike Vrabel wants to hammer home with him, even said as much after the game last night. But I thought it was a much better showing for him against the Eagles than we saw against the Colts. So like to see him continue to take some steps forward. That's a position that the Patriots obviously need some juice as a pass rushing group. So even if this isn't a player that you're going to be able to trust on first and second down to stop the run and set the edge, there's certainly a spot for him as a situational pass rusher. I think that's exactly what he is at this point in his career. So like to see that for him moving forward. And Amari Gaynor, only 10 pass rushing snaps for him. He recorded 3 tackles, 3 pressures, a quarterback hit, a sack, and a hurry on those snaps, and had the highest true pass rushing grade of all of the Patriots on the night with an 84.3 grade. He looks like an absolute monster out there on the field. If you just see this guy, he is a physical presence. Obviously not a player that we feel like is going to have much staying power when we get past cutdown day, but certainly a practice squad candidate. And for a great portion of the night when the Patriots were struggling in the trenches, it really felt like when Gaynor and that third team defense got out there, you could throw Quintavious Hutchins into the mix. That got the strip sack that sealed the game for the Patriots at the very end of that one. A little bit of an uptick in the production than we saw from the first half of play. So really like to see that, and a silver lining in an otherwise kind of bleak performance for the Patriots in the trenches. You got one more for us here, Tyler, or any closing thoughts before we start to wrap this up?
No, feel free to close it up. Sorry to end on a dull note, but yeah, feel free to close it up. No more on me.
All righty, guys. Well, if this is your first touch point with us, we'd like to thank you for being here and for staying all the way until the end. For more from us on the Patriots, be sure to head over to the Patriots Roundtable website at roundtable.io. And if you're enjoying what we do with the show on a weekly basis, the best way you could possibly support us is by joining as a member on the Roundtable website. It's fast, it's easy, and it's completely free. And your membership allows you to join the discussion directly with us. We're trying to build a great community of sports fans over on the site, and your membership would help us greatly with that. So please head over to roundtable.io by using the link in the description below and tell us what you think. Who stood out to you in the Patriots preseason win over the Philadelphia Eagles, and who are you going to be on the lookout for as the Patriots prepare for the preseason finale against the Cleveland Browns? Let us know in that comment section below or over on the community boards on the Roundtable website. We look forward to seeing you there. For Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Marotta. For all of us at Patriots Roundtable, we'd like to thank you for listening here today. We are signing off until next time.